Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. We're going to wait just a few moments here for everyone to trickle in. So go ahead and get settled, get comfy. We've got about an hour here to dive into a great topic. All right. Looks like we're filling up here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And for anyone that's joining late, this will be recorded and you can rewatch or catch any parts that you happen to miss in the future. So thank you for joining the Biome Makers May webinar. We've got a great topic today, from product trials to precision placement that drives revenue. So let's have some fun with it. What we're going to be discussing today are how to connect field trials to product placement in the grower's field. So field trials are a standard way to demonstrate product impact. Biological products are particularly sensitive to environmental conditions, so running proper field trials and also putting those results into context is critical for successful outcomes, meaning an understanding of when and where the product will work best in the farmer's field. And today we've got three great speakers, particularly our first two. We're all on the Biome Makers team here. So we've got Mark Kinsey, our Director of US Sales, Dr. Jacob Parnell, our Global Head of Agronomy, and myself, Sunny Kircher, our Key Account Manager. We'll be sharing our contact information at the end of this and would love to hear from you with any questions, ideas, or thoughts that you have coming out of this webinar. So, what we're really talking about here today is how to make better decisions. The ag market right now is down. Growers are feeling pressured, operating on limited budgets, and the right decision really matters this year. But it really matters in every year, regardless. We are really focused on ag inputs here and biologicals, biostimulants in particular, and how those will perform best in the field. So some of the things that we have really learned here at Biome Makers are that not all acres are equal, particularly from a biological lens. And it's so important to understand the microbiome and how that changes from field to field and even within each field to then apply that to proper management. So input decisions carry a lot of risk and potentially a lot of reward as well. So having a good understanding of the field dynamics will yield well. And what we've seen in a lot of places is that biologicals in their standard programs, they can fall short, or they'll perform really well 10, 20, 60% of the time, but we want to get to 90%, 100%. So the best way we can do that is being fully informed about how the field works. And then lastly, and this is a really key piece of what we're discussing today, is that product performance can just be lost in translation from the R&D team or the commercial research team at an ag input company. They might have a great data set and great results, but how to translate to all of the people down the line through the distribution channel and all the way to the farmer to ensure that those results and findings are being put into proper context is a challenge in itself. So we have worked really hard to develop programs and solutions to make sure that that scientific rigor gets translated to the very end, to the grower's decision. And so a little bit about us as a company. We are a global team. We're on a mission to illuminate soil biology and put that in context of agricultural decision making. So weaving in these complex data sets into everyday decisions to optimize both crop yield, but also long-term longevity of the field. So that's building soil health and being smart about input decisions so that the grower is yielding as best they can, the highest ROI possible. And so with that, we have been testing soil and looking at biology for 11 years to date. We're active in over 55 different countries and have reported on over 200 different crop types. So we have a huge diversity in our database. It's one of the largest in the world as far as our reference database for the microorganisms. We're looking at bacteria and fungi in the soil, that first trophic level, as indicators of overall soil potential. We have 2 headquarter labs, one here in the US and another in Europe, and then a global network of lab partners running standardized DNA extraction. So we're able to support a wide variety of customers, and we have a heavy scientific background, 17 patents, and multiple peer-reviewed papers. They're all available on our website, and we've also run field trials on over 400 different biological products and management practices, replicated field trials, which we'll get into a little bit here. And we're also supporting a wide variety of customers. We have a huge community of ag input manufacturers and working primarily with R&D teams and also the commercial teams in applying the research done on the products. Also working with retailers, of course, farmers directly, and CPGs. And just a bit about our technology. I'm going to keep it really high level for today, but if you want to know more, we have an online library on our website where we really dig into some of the details of how we're generating bee crop metrics. But I want to give a little reference here for anyone that's new to Biome Makers. So we're taking physical soil samples, receiving those at the lab, and we are extracting the DNA the same way that you would do a chemical extraction to run fertility testing. We are looking at, as I said, biology, the bacteria and fungal communities, and we're translating that into biological data. So first, we are identifying all of the species detected and their abundance, the total counts, but also identifying their functional potential. And that's where the simplification comes in of translating a very complex data set, really large files, into something that makes sense at the field level to put into context and take action on. And then our third and very important step is translating all of this into our digital platform. So not only summarizing field trials and getting the results into a digestible place, but also our diagnostic platform. So that's Bee Crop Farm, where we are projecting the results into spatial maps, creating recommendation programs, and also summarizing at a field and farm level. So that's a bit about what we're doing here. A lot of research has gone into this, and our job is to communicate and translate the really complex data sets into actionable items. So with that, let's talk a little bit about how we run field trials at Biome Makers. And the primary goal is to measure the impact of a product or practice on the microbiome. And so from that, we can apply the results in many different ways. But I want to hear a little bit from Mark Kinsey, who has a lot of background in designing and running proper field trials in his history with Nutrien running their ag innovation trials. So Mark, tell me a little bit about how do we prove product performance beyond yield alone in the context of the microbiome and the work we're doing at Biome Makers?
Yeah, Sunny, that's really a great question, and yield is one of the driving factors. I mean, it's the key factor in calculating ROI. But when we look at current situation and we look at where we want to go, understanding things that impact beyond yield. So looking at nutrient use efficiency, how did we help mitigate stress? Those are all factors or metrics that go into yield, but really haven't had a strong or sound way of measuring and then incorporating those into the understanding at the end of the year. Instead of just looking at a data sheet and understanding did it win from a yield or not, being able to tie in, did we move other metrics? For example, like phosphorus solubilization, stress mitigation. So being able to measure those, record those, and marry that data with traditional data sets becomes increasingly important to understand the overall system and being able to get to things like nitrogen use efficiency or other nutrient use efficiency type scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about measuring when and where do products deliver the greatest impact?
So that's that's a key point in being able to run field trials, is knowing when and where to measure. So for example, in our B crop trials platform, we have the T0, and then we have other timings that you can put on in T1, T2, T3, depending on what you're testing. So we have the ability to look at these biological factors from before the crop is, or before the treatment is established, and then be able to look at the influence of on that microbiome throughout the growing season to understand when, where, and how the shifts changed. Did it continue to ramp up? Did it fade out? What was the key timing? And then be able to, again, marry that to things like yield and other metrics that we gather for the end of the season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like so often we see inconsistency in product performance, whether that's from different locations, different soil types, or just different management practices. So of course, like staying organized in how you set up and also record keep in a trial is so important, to have just that information accessible, but then to also translate it into real world situations in the future.
Yeah, that's where our world's largest taxonomic database and all the work that's been done of being able to test products and know the crop that we're growing into, and being able to look at, are we testing in one zone, or we need to test in 4, 5, 6 zones depending on the crop. Having that background understanding of, we've tested a lot of products, we kind of know what works where, and being able to expand on that, so that way, regardless of who we're working with and what the product is, we've got a pretty good baseline to be able to set trials up, make sure that they're executed in a broad enough geography and encompassing enough variables to really tease out the who, what, when, where, how, and why, if you will, of a product, so that when the manufacturer takes that product and takes it out to the sales force or directly to a grower, they can deliver that product with confidence and have a very strong understanding of where it's going to win, and also understand that there may be situations that they're aware of where it may not have the greatest response that they're looking for, but because of the amount of attributes and things that we look at, it's generally not just a singular type enhancement or potential win, we'll call it, when we have the ability to incorporate DNA testing and the metrics that we deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, today we have hundreds of input manufacturers and thousands of products for both retailers and growers to choose from. What are some of the top ways that an input manufacturer can differentiate in this crowded and increasingly competitive market?
Well, one is just information. Like I said, really understanding and digging in, understanding the metrics that their product has positive effect on, or may not know it. With our testing, it may have an adverse effect, but knowing that is important as well. But just the understanding of all the different levers that a product has the ability to enhance or do, given different environments. I think we'll see in a few slides, Dr. Jacob can get into a singular product can have very different responses given its geographic location and conditions. So having that better understanding of where we have the best chance for a win and generating ROI is really key. That's really going to be the big differentiator, and that's the beauty of our system of being able to marry this from front to back. With the data, with the science, and then simplification of being able to execute it at the field.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing on that. And let's dig into a real world example. How about that?
Great.
Okay, so today we selected one of the trials that we've done here at Biome Makers to get a good breadth of information. And this is a 21 location trial that we ran on potatoes. And the research question was understanding how a biofungicide performed compared to the grower standard practice. So this biofungicide it's anonymized for this case study, but the active ingredient is Bacillus subtilis. And like I said, this was replicated in 21 locations across the United States. And the green circles you see on the map, there's some locations we ran multiple trials or at multiple different sites. So the larger the circle means more trials in different fields. And then the sampling protocol, we followed a very standard protocol, both industry-wide and also what we require here at Biome Makers is a minimum of 3 replicates per sampling event, and we're measuring a control block and also the treated block. And in this case, we did 3 different time points. The first being our T0 was the baseline before the product was applied. And that way we were able to measure any variability that happens to already exist between the blocks so that we can really measure what did the product do versus maybe confusing that with the conditions that were already present in the field. And so there were 2 different time points of sampling events throughout the season. And yeah, so what we do at Biome Makers is we run a delta-delta analysis, measuring the delta over time compared to the delta between the 2 blocks. And what that yields is a single percentage score, so the fold change, measuring how things moved between the blocks and over time. And we apply that to each of the bee crop metrics. We have over 50 of those. So, you might be wondering, so what exactly are you measuring? We are applying numerical values. We're quantifying the biological functionality in the soil so that we have an objective number to actually be able to measure. And so a lot of ecosystem modeling and the functional markers that were detected are in the backbone of generating those scores. So these are roughly like our top 3 categories of what we're looking at in the soil. So nutrient availability and efficiency, so the biological pathways for making nutrients plant available, and then the phytohormones, and then disease suppression indication and disease presence, and then as well as stress adaptation compounds. So this all provides credible science-backed evidence to support product claims and also strengthen market positioning of the products. All right, so Dr. Jacob, tell us, what did we find in this 21 location trial? What were some of the results?
Yeah, so what we found is actually something that's quite typical of biological products, and that's that in each location it looks like it works a little bit differently. So here, this is just a graph of all of those locations showing when we look at what we see as improved, what categories do that fall in? And you can see that there's quite a range. Some of these, we've got, I've kind of divided it into those 4 big categories that you mentioned of just improving the overall biodiversity, the functionality of the soil, looking at nutrient cycling, looking at improving kind of that stress mitigation that Mark was talking about earlier about, phytohormones and stress response, and then also looking at disease control. And you can see, across these 21 different locations, it's quite a bit different. And even within, where we see, for example, there are several that, nutritional pathways, those pathways might be different. In one location, it might be nitrogen. In another, it might be phosphorus. So this is something that we've kind of always known. When we do biologicals, we always look at it and we say, it works in some places and doesn't work in others. Or, we didn't do anything with yield, but we saw it, or with disease, but we did see something with yield. We saw better plant growth. We saw this. And so there are all these characteristics that up until now, we haven't really been able to figure out what's going on. And so this is a really good way of being able to see inside the soil how the microbes are interacting with the plant to really show what is going on in each one of these locations. And the nice thing about this is that with something like this, then we can go back to those locations, and we can start to look at those locations and say, okay, why was location 1, how is that different from location 2? What are some of those characteristics? And since we've done enough locations, we could start to kind of almost predict, why was phytohormone and stress response so much, better improved in location 2? And we can start to figure out why that happened and why it interacted that way, so that hopefully at some point we would then be able to predict and say, oh, this is what the microbiome looks like in this field. These are the characteristics of this field. We would anticipate then that if we apply our product here, it would look something like it did in location 7 or like it did in location 19, something like that, where we can actually start to figure out what is my product going to do here. And maybe there are places where we say, it's really not going to do what we really want it to do in these locations. And so let's sell one of our different products there. Let's not sell this product in those locations where we don't really think it's going to work.
Interesting. So yeah, there's a lot more variability here than you would see in trial results from a chemistry or fertility application. And you're saying that means these products still work, but they work differently.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the thing is, if we're only looking at yield, we're going to say, yeah, maybe in 70% of these we got a response when we're just looking at yield. But if we look at the whole microbiome, we can say, well, we've got some stress mitigation that might not come across as yield because we had a really great season, and the plants weren't under a temperature or a water or salt stress that required this microbiome, but it was there. And so if we continue to market it and sell it to these growers saying, it does work, you just had a really great year.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's take a deeper look here at the bee crop platform.
Yeah. So as you go into our portal, after having done a trial, these are some of the ways that you would see these kind of the product, the trials shown. And so we can see that we've got that first, I apologize, it's very small, but that first column is the location. And then we can go over to category. That category is what I kind of divided it in the last slide. Okay. So we've got nutrition, we've got biological soil quality, that's kind of that biodiversity. You'd be able to see stress response and phytohormones and disease as well. And then you can go in and you can look at individual things. So in this case, you're able to look at specific pathways. I mentioned that some places you might have nitrogen versus phosphorus, or we can see there's a manganese transport. We also have the fold change. How much of a change was there? And then that last little bit is showing that it was a positive effect. So when we look at these changes, we're able to do significant values on this. And in this case, that positive effect reflects a 0.1 p-value. So we're 90% confident that we really did see that response in that location. So we're 90% positive that when we applied this bacillus, we did see an inorganic phosphorus solubilization increase. And in this case, the average was about a 17% increase in those pathways. So we're able to look and see exactly kind of what's going on within the microbiome that is really kind of interacting with the plant. Yeah, and so here what I've done is I've basically kind of looked at kind of the disease pressure. So this was marketed and put forward as a biofungicide product. And so we're able to see that that in many cases we can see that, for example, Fusarium wilt and Fusarium dry rot, that was a decrease of 61% in that location, which did have that 0.1 p-value. So we did see a significant decrease in Fusarium wilt. So you can divide it up and say, this is what I'm expecting to see. I want to look. You can see that category right there. You can select for each one of those categories to be able to say, I'm looking specifically, since it's a biofungicide, at this category. And so you can kind of sort these and values, and you can start to look deeper into kind of what's driving the changes that you see. So if we go to the next one thing that I do want to point out, this is something else that we can look at, is so you might look at that and say, well, I had a biofungicide. Why didn't I see, more stuff that was going on? Why didn't I see that? And we can look at it, and this is really kind of giving us a baseline, a picture of what the disease pressure was in a lot of those trialed fields. And you can see, for example, we mentioned fusarium, and it's the fourth one down on there is that fusarium dry rot. We can see that in 6 of those locations, we have yellow, which is kind of that low level. So it's kind of the idea of, one of the reasons why we might not have seen a big shift in fusarium was that there wasn't a whole lot of fusarium there to begin with. We did see it in 6 of those locations. We did see it. In 6, we really didn't see a whole lot of it. And so, one of the things that we've kind of talked about internally is that, it would be great to use this also to place trials. If you're saying, hey, our stuff works great with fusarium, you'd want to put it in a location where we would be able to say there is fusarium there to begin with. And so you might avoid putting those trials in kind of those 6 locations that are shown there.
Yeah, like the same reason people would inoculate the field with the pathogen, just to ensure that it's there. This is like a whole new way to use bee crop to screen your trial locations to ensure they're good candidates for testing product performance.
Precisely. Yeah, and for a grower as well to be able to look at this and say, well, it looks like I really, if this bacillus product works, then I really only need to put it in 6 of those fields, and I don't need to put it in the other 6 because that's not an issue yet. So it kind of brings it all together in one place, where it's like where you place the trials, what results you get from the trials, and then where you market and position the placement of the product later on, which we'll get into a little bit later.
Okay, great context.
And then, these last ones, this is just showing phosphorus cycling. We can do the same thing. In this case, we're kind of going one level further. So instead of, we've divided it by that category of nutrition. And then we looked at phosphorus pathways, and all of the phosphorus pathways that involve that cycle, that include both what's making phosphorus available for the plant as well as what's competing with the plant for phosphorus. Mm-hmm. So we're able to look at that to kind of put together what is going on in that whole nutrient cycle. And then
I see some places where looks like phosphorus cycling performed really well, and other locations not so well.
Yeah, exactly. So that one that has the red dot by it, that one actually showed that you had a decrease in phosphorus solubilization in that location.
Okay.
And so here is a prime example of it works some places and it doesn't work in other places if you are looking at that one metric.
Got it.
But if you look at the whole thing, we're seeing a lot of different things. And so in that second location, you might have had a lot of stress mitigation that's going on or something like that. One other thing that we can look at on the next slide is I've just kind of shown that if you want to look at the locations side by side, the last drop down box at the top, you can click on that and it will go down to the location, and you can see each one of the locations individually. And in this case, I've kind of narrowed it down to the phytohormone and stress adaptation or mitigation. And so you can see side by side, like, what about auxin production? What happened across that? And so you can see each location side by side to be able to see really kind of what's going on with those products. And then the last thing I want to point out is that that button right there, the yellow button, the export button, you can click on that and you can actually download all of these data for yourself. So if you don't want to use our kind of drop down boxes up there to sort and to filter and do everything, you can just export it as a CSV file, and then you can play around with it and do all the statistics you want on these values.
Yeah, that's great flexibility. Okay. Well, yeah, I see here that location 55, there was a reduction in all of the phytohormones listed here, but these two locations, 56 and 57, generally quite positive. So,
well, and yeah, and one thing that I would want to point out is that we don't have any significance values on those. And so while it says that there is an average decrease, it's not significant unless we've got the little circle by it where we kind of say, hey, this is something to be of interest.
Yeah.
But you would be able to say that if you were just looking at the phytohormone production, it doesn't really do anything in that first location, but it does in those next two locations.
Yeah, there's a lot of information here. It's really valuable, and it seems like there's a lot of nuance to it as well. It'd be great to have a tool to help make decisions once we're out in the field.
Well, and it goes back to what Mark was saying of kind of, setting yourself apart or distinguishing one product from the other is that information that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a wealth of information that you have in this, and that's the information that you can use to build trust with your consumers, to be able to say, yeah, I know that in that first location, if you're looking for phytohormone, this probably isn't the best product, or it's going to do nitrogen cycling, but it's not going to do phytohormones.
Yeah, and building confidence in the distributors and the agronomists of knowing when to recommend said product.
Exactly. Yeah, this is just showing that it's kind of a repeat of that first one. I've just kind of divided it up to show that there are, those subgenes in the auxin, cytokinin, gibberellin, these different pathways, and how often they show up across these. But we can see that for example, in carbon cycling, 62% of the locations improved some metric of carbon cycling. So 13 of the 21 locations were either showing a decrease in methanogenesis, or a decrease in organic compound degradation. So that are kind of saying that you're starting to build up more carbon in the soil. So these are things that you can say, yeah, overall, big picture, this is what's going on in the soil. It's not happening in every location. And in some locations, it might be one or the other, but you are seeing some changes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know biodiversity and carbon cycling, both as categories, they might not have direct function to lead to increased yield, but they are like both backbones of building soil health and overall resilience in the soil that will lead to increased function and ultimately yield gain as well.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Jacob. And Mark, could you round us off here and kind of put this in context of all the decisions and data sets that might be taken into consideration at the field level?
Yeah, so I think you guys did a great job of explaining. And just to wrap it up, there's strong science that we can deploy with you and your products to be able to test, identify the who, when, where, how, and why does it work. And then the next portion we'll get into is that practical application. So, bringing everything full circle. It's one thing to test a product. It's another to take it out of the greenhouse and to put it in field conditions. And then it's a whole nother to be able to put this into whole field in the grower's hands and have a real strong understanding of what's going on. So that's the confidence that comes from our analysis and the science and the team being able to run the stats and deliver those positive effects and the stats behind it, that confidence interval to make those recommendations. So yeah, I think anything else I missed?
Well, tell us a little bit about Biome Makers' solution to this and what's our offering here.
So the exciting part is you get through all the testing and you kind of get to the, I hate to word it this way, but I will, of the so what. Like, you know, you've got a product, you've tested it, but what's the practical application? And, you know, the exciting part is Bee Crop Farm. So Bee Crop Farm is it's been around for almost 2 years now, and it is the field level spatial visualization of all the metrics that we just shared, that we can show what moved up and moved down. But it is now that spatial representation of what's going on in the field for each one of those metrics. So where is methanogenesis, you know, an anaerobic process? Where is it high or where is it low in the field? Where are my phosphorus solubilizers high versus low? This gets into, you know, we kind of alluded to it with trials, but being able to test ahead of time and understand, you know, where a product is a good fit is something that we're doing with a couple of partners now, of actually running Bee Crop Farm in front of trials, so that we have an idea of what's going on in the field. And so when we go to set a trial, we can go ahead and set one in an area, to Dr. Jacobs' point of, if we're looking at disease, we want to make sure that we put it in an area that has enough of the diseases that we want to look at to look for an effect. If no disease is really present and we apply, you know, something to prevent it, you're really not going to get the answer you're looking for. So same thing, whether it's phosphorus solubilizer, stress mitigation, there's a whole host of opportunities that knowing that up front allows for better placement of trials and validation, but then also comes full circle of, once we have that data, there's no longer a question of how to apply it. Once you're on a Bee Crop Farm and you know the metrics that your product moves up and down and the geography that it's in, it becomes really simple to make a recommendation and understand all the metrics and all the opportunities that a product is going to have an effect on that crop. So again, not just yield, but how do we, again, maintain yield, better use efficiency, all those other things that come into ROI to make a farm profitable.
Yeah, so it's like Bee Crop Farm could even say it converts all this trials data and makes it personal.
Yeah, thank you for summarizing.
Sure. Well, I'd love to look at the platform here and put this in context. Let's take a look. So here we have some screenshots from the Bee Crop portal, looking at a potato farm. I believe this is in Indiana. We've got a few different fields highlighted here, and we've got 5 different sections, different menus you can select from on the left here, and I will have Jacob go into some of the results.
Yeah, so this is, again, similar to what we have with trials. We've got very, like, different layers associated with this. So at the very top layer, the highest level, we kind of have this best fit solution, that's that bottom, the one with the light bulb, that we've got highlighted here. And this is going to kind of show you, like what is the status of your soil. So that's kind of this biosustainability score that we have. And then, you know, if you've worked with our partner labs to do some physical chemical analysis, we would be able to have in there the CO2 equivalent associated with how much carbon do you have stored in that soil. But then we can also get down to the kind of the needs. What are the things that you should really kind of address at this point? And the nutrition, it's kind of like, yeah, there's a moderate need to address nutrition, and there's a high need to address kind of the healthiness, the disease aspect, not just the disease itself, the presence of the pathogen, but the ability of the plants to kind of defend against that pathogen. And then beneath that, we've got that kind of best fit solution. And so we give some ideas of what kinds of products could be used in the field. And you'll notice that right there, kind of the second one down is bacillus. That's exactly what we were looking for in the trials. And so since we've seen that it works in the trials, we can say, yeah, bacillus is going to work in these locations. But we're also able to say, so for example, right now I've got highlighted this other microbial-based biostimulants. And in this case, if we zoom back out a little bit, we can see that only one of the 4 fields, or I guess 2 of the 4 fields are highlighted there. And so here we're kind of indicating, you know what, we would recommend putting it in these 2 fields, and we don't really think it's going to do much in the other 2 fields. So just that kind of information of being able to say, put it here, don't put it here. This is what we recommend. This is, these are the products that you can choose from. And it's not really product that we're looking at. I should point out, it's more kind of a product category, or the active ingredient in a product. And so we're not trying to sell a specific product. We're trying to make it easier for growers to choose what that is. Now, having said that, I can imagine a point where we would get with a retailer that says, hey, we're white labeling these 30 products. We want to test these, and we want our team to be able to know what product to sell to what grower in what field. Then in that case, I would imagine that we would have for them an account where they would be able to, it would basically pop up and say, our nutrient product A, should go in, in these fields. So that then they would have that better information.
So the agronomist or the grower will enroll their fields in Bee Crop Farm and submit the soil samples and get these results. And this is like their guide for understanding what's going on biologically and recommendations for how to improve the functionality.
Exactly. And I think this high layer is ideal for the grower, or for a retail agronomist that is just kind of trying to say, what should I advise you to do? What product should you place where? And we do have another layer that then kind of goes, which is the one just above it. So I think, yeah. So go, to the metrics slide.
This one?
There we go. So this one, you can see that we're now highlighting all of the metrics. So this, we talked about, we have like these 60 metrics that you can look at. And here we've got those each labeled out. So you can actually pull up a map of every single one of those layers. In this case right now, we're looking at the abundance of fusarium across these fields. And like we showed in kind of the trials, a couple of these fields, you have fairly low levels of fusarium, but there are 2 of the fields where it's a little bit higher. And so if I were looking at this, I would maybe start to say, okay, if I'm doing trials, those are the 2 fields where I would place those trials. Or if I'm a grower, I would say, you know what, I'm a little bit nervous having that much fusarium in those fields. I'm going to want to be able to do something about the fusarium, look at some products that are good with fusarium. And in the previous part, we had trichoderma, which is a biological product that does fight fusarium, as one of the things that you can put in there, as well as the bacillus. The bacillus was in there as well for all 4 of those fields.
Yeah. So these 2 fields right here, not only at higher risk for fusarium damage to the crop, but also likely a higher ROI on a intervention.
Precisely, yes, because the fusarium is probably going to have a higher impact on those fields.
Wow. Well, I'll just say as an agronomist or a retailer, to have this cheat sheet almost handy to interpret field conditions and put into context with the large portfolio of options for biologicals is really quite a time-saving and confidence-boosting thing to see.
Yeah, and I want to point out that the scores that are underneath those off to the side are for all 4 of the fields. But as you've shown here, you can highlight a specific field, and then you can find out what the score is, and then there's also that arrow that's pointing down, kind of in the corner there. And clicking on that, you can basically download a guide for that field. So if you're a retailer or an agronomist, a consultant, you can basically say, I've got 20 clients, I've got 20 fields across this area, and you can basically download for each field its own little guide. And so I think,
Okay.
we can go to the next.
So we've got a 72 out of 100 is the risk across the entire farm, but then on this field, it's an average of 69 out of 100 for
Exactly.
Fusarium dry rot, and it's
And
100
you
acres.
break down,
Okay.
73% of the field is kind of in that medium level, and then 26.5 is kind of at a high level of Fusarium abundance in that field.
Okay.
These are two different reports. One is this one on the left is really showing kind of at that farm level. So this is something that you'd be able to hand out to each one of the growers of those fields. You'd be able to hand this out. They'd be able to go through, and it shows pretty much all of the information that is on that portal, but kind of in a different format. It shows what the biodiversity is and what your needs are. It also shows kind of what are the best fit solutions for those fields. And then it goes down through each one of the different metrics. And the one on the right is kind of for the whole farm. So sometimes you've got a farm manager that is managing, in this case, 4 different fields. And they're just like, I can't micromanage. I can't, treat each. I just want to know what should I do on all 4 fields that's going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so that farm report gives them that information. And then at times, if I'm a crop consultant or an agronomy consultant that is working with them, or retailer even, I would want to be able to say, hey, here's the report for your farm, for what you should be doing, and go through them with that. And so we've kind of got these different layers that you can look at.
That's great. And the field level report, you can really get into like the precision management, but then translating that to, what is my total risk? Like that might translate into an order of a product, or, what volume am I going to need of something? It's really helpful for then the financial piece, or just like planning and whatnot. So this is great. Thank you so much for this case study here, Jacob. I know we're getting kind of close to the end here, so I want to tie this all together and look at some of the numbers. So what is the ROI for these investments, for building the trials data set and translating it into on-farm decision making? So we'll look at this both through the input manufacturer's lens and the farmers. So what we have here is a case study of looking at a 100-acre potato field. And these numbers, the estimates for yield and cost of production, are based on Michigan numbers. It's all very simplified and rough. So if anyone feels offended by these numbers or they're way off, I'd love to hear from you. We did discuss this with a few of our clients. And I actually pulled that same field that we just looked at, the 100-acre field that had roughly 76% were medium pressure of Fusarium. And then we had high pressure on about 26%. But I rounded this all to nice even numbers. So with that, we've got 4 different options to consider on this 100-acre potato field. What are we going to do with the Fusarium? One option is nothing, leave it untreated. Next, we could fumigate the entire field, just go in and I guess err on the side of caution and try to get rid of all the Fusarium, which of course has a higher cost to it. And our third scenario is apply the biofungicide that we ran the trials on to the whole field. And lastly, a precision combo. And so rough estimate for our overhead, the cost of operation, just so we get like somewhat realistic numbers here, is $4,500 an acre. So we got that as a steady in every case. And then let's look at the cost of the Fusarium management. So for fumigation, we kind of went with the average, slightly above average cost of fumigation at $275 an acre. Whereas this biofungicide costs a lot less, $75 an acre. And then lastly, the precision combo. So this would be a benefit of running Bee Crop Farm, of understanding exactly where in the field are the Fusarium pressures at what level. So in this case, it would be a 25-75 acre split. So it's really only those 25 acres that have high pressure and might actually warrant fumigation. And the other 75 with a moderate risk, the biofungicide would probably be really impactful and, of course, a lower cost. So at $7 an acre, pretty modest $700 investment in Bee Crop Farm, you're able to understand that 25-75 acre split. And of course, you know, in this case study, we're only looking at fusarium, but you're also getting the other 54 different biological metrics and insights that go along with it. So there's a lot more that Bee Crop Farm will deliver on besides the fusarium risk. And so then the cost of the product application. So multiplying this by 100 acres, we have about 27,000 for the fumigation, 7,500 for the biofungicide, much lower. And also bearing in mind, this is a bacillus. So it's not only going to improve your disease resistance, but all the other metrics that we saw that Dr. Jacob covered in the trials result, depending on the field conditions, there will be other benefits of applying this product, namely nutrient cycling and phytohormone production. And then with the acre split, you know, we have a slightly higher cost here, 96.25, but you're getting the more powerful treatment where it's really merited, and then the biofungicide in the moderate risk. So how does this affect yield? Untreated, we could have quite a yield loss. I put in 340 100 pounds per acre. It could be even more damaging, but I think that's a good placeholder. And between running the whole field fumigant and the precision combo, I think we're going to have pretty great yields. Realistically, with the biofungicide, it may or may not really address the high pressure area. So we might have a slight yield drag there. But coming down to the bottom and looking at how do the numbers work out here, and total profit on the field, we can see that the first option, not treating the fusarium, it's going to be a rough year there. But with treatment, there's quite a variety here in the outcomes, and we can see that with treating this pathogen with precision and good information, and even including the cost of the treatment and the diagnostics, is going to yield $15,000 to $20,000 higher on the field. So that's I'd say a pretty nice gain, and not even considering all the other benefits of what you can do with the information from Bee Crop Farm there. So any thoughts or questions on this? We'd love to hear them. And we're going to wrap it up here and open up for a Q&A. Mark, why don't you bring us home here, tying all this together?
Thanks, Sunny. So hopefully we've brought you kind of full circle today of, you know, if you've got a product, you want to test it, you know, the real driving is trying to eliminate churn and build confidence. That's probably one of the biggest challenges we face is, you know, a grower tries a product and if it's not successful that first time, or we haven't set realistic expectations, you know, maintaining that customer and growing and having the opportunity to deliver that next valuable solution becomes a challenge. So being able to test with confidence, understand where, how, why, and when products perform best or may not be a fit, and then being able to bring it full circle. You know, at the end of the day, how do we get the recommendation from the retail, from the agronomist to the grower in an easy, executable, understandable fashion? And so, you know, Bee Crop Farm is the application of what we've tested and being able to apply it, whether that's at a whole field or at a subfield level through a prescription. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here. And again, the whole goal is to build confidence through each step of the process and make that decision and retention of your grower and adoption of your product a lot simpler and better, which drives revenue for you as a manufacturer and also ROI for the grower.
Amazing. Well, this is quite a package. I think the combination of running trials and then taking that out to the field is the goal, right, of most of our clients, our input manufacturer clients, are to to understand the product, and then of course, obviously sell it and sell it well, and to make sure that it's making an impact for the grower and everyone in between, that it's an easy product to use and that it's giving success in the end. So
Sunny,
thank you guys so much.
I have to throw in there, think of it this way. The old saying is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think we've shown that that's a very true scenario, especially when dealing with biology and incorporating this into a full acre solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a few questions here, and we've got a few minutes left, so we'll get through what we can. One I'm going to pitch to you, Dr. Jacob, is, let's see, how do we need to structure the trials in order to create recommendations? How do we choose the crop and location?
That's a really good question. So a couple of things to point out is that soils can be very different, and the biology in soils can be very different, and the microbiome for different crops is also very different. And so if we're structuring these trials to be able to figure out where to put it, first we need to have a variety of different soils, different climates, different locations, like what we did with that 21 different location trial. So I want to point out that map that we had of those locations, I don't think any of the locations were in Indiana. But because we had done such a wide range of different soils, we could predict then what was going to happen in the soil in Indiana, and then say bacillus would work here. So one is we need to have a wide variety of soils, and then it's going to be crop dependent. And so, for example, if I have a product that I say, for potatoes, I wouldn't be able to then say I can start recommending this for corn to do the same thing. It would just be for kind of potatoes. And so those are kind of the two ways of structuring trials.
Got it. Thank you for that. Okay, one more. This one's a little tougher, but what happens if my product isn't recommended?
That is actually a really great question. If your product is not recommended, I would say don't try to sell it to them. If it's not recommended, then it's likely not going to work, and you might actually lose a customer. I was sitting at a conference a while ago, next to a grower, and I pointed up, somebody was it was one of those typical presentations at biological conferences where it's like, it works everywhere. We get a 30% bump in yield and every single. And I asked him what he thought about it, and he said, "Oh, it's just all garbage." And he said, "I'm waiting for somebody to tell me not to buy their product. Once they say your product is not going to work here, that's the one I'm going to trust." And that's really what we're able to do, is we're able to say, if you can say, you know what, don't either, one option is to say, don't buy my product, or the other option is to say, let me find something a product that I have that will work here that is not this product. So I can find, product B and see, and it's like, okay, that's something that is going to work to improve the soil in this field. But don't buy product A.
That's, I mean, it's psychological, and it's trust building. It's using data to make good decisions, and a decision doesn't always mean move forward.
Can I jump in for a second?
Please.
So I think the question is, if my product's not recommended, well, first of all, we actually don't recommend products. We recommend, the active ingredient or the mode of action or this and that. So, it wouldn't actually be a true product recommendation. And I would say that the thing to do is if you are actually running a bee crop trial, the odds of you having a negative effect, if you will, so a 90% confidence that everything was negative, like that's going to be one valuable to know. Odds of that happening on a product are probably slim. So I think it comes back to, identifying what your product is, and then being able to take the next step of where does it work. So it's not just saying that, you know, a product doesn't work, but what does it do and where does it win? Because that's valuable information rather than I've seen it countless times, you know, outside of the biological world. Of if you don't have the right data sets and you're not looking in the right way, there's a lot of products that get killed or get a bad label because we didn't have the right understanding of why it didn't work. To Dr. Jacob talking earlier about disease, if we apply, you know, something to impact disease or mitigate it, but we don't have disease pressure, did we really learn anything?
Yep. I have both of these tools, Bee Crop Trials and Bee Crop Farms, are for illuminating how products work and where they will be successful. So they're just core pieces of a maturing industry and taking the wonder and the guesswork out of biological product performance and application. So we are actually just a minute over time here. So this has been a great conversation. Mark, Jacob, thank you so much for your insights and your expertise, and hope to do one of these again with you in the future. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining. I hope you learned something new and feel better about biological products in one way or another. This recording will be published on our website in the online library, along with many others. So feel free to give it a rewatch or dig a little bit deeper into some of our technology or other case studies. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And thank you again. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.